She froze. Not in hesitation, not in thought, but in a heartbeat so sharp it felt like the world had stopped around her. The terminal buzzed with motion, rolling suitcases clattering, announcements echoing to the cavernous hall, footsteps like drumbeats. But none of it reached her. She only saw them. Across the crowd, a man appeared, holding the hands of two girls. Her daughters. Not the baby she had left behind 6 years ago, but girls. Older now, taller, laughing, moving with a grace she had only imagined in photographs and birthday videos she had missed. Her breath caught, jagged, as if someone had punched the air out of her lungs. The designer coat on her shoulders felt suddenly heavy, the weight of her wealth meaningless in the face of this moment. Her bag swung from her arm, but she didn't notice it. The sound of the airport, the people rushing past, the neon signs flashing departures and arrivals, all of it faded into silence. She could only see them. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Her chest heaved. Her heart hammered. 6 years had passed like a tidal wave, sweeping away moments she could never reclaim. The birthdays she hadn't celebrated. The school plays she hadn't clapped for. The bedtime stories left untold. All of it pressed against her in a single, suffocating pulse. She wanted to move. She wanted to run. She wanted to vanish in the crowd, to hide from the raw truth staring back at her in the form of two small, radiant faces. But her feet refused to obey. They were glued to the polished tile, trapped in a moment that demanded reckoning. She watched as he led them, each step deliberate, every motion a silent reminder that life had carried on without her. He hadn't noticed her yet, and maybe that was mercy. Or maybe it was the final cruelty of a universe, to let her see what she had lost before she could speak a word. The girls laughed, a pure sound that cut through her like sunlight through a storm. They chased each other, spinning in the glow of the terminal lights. So carefree, so alive. She saw their hair, catching the artificial glow, their tiny hands grasping each other's fingers with innocence she hadn't seen in years. And in that moment, she realized something she had refused to admit. The power she wielded in boardrooms, the fortune she had built, the accolades, the trophies, the world-class cars parked in her garage. They meant nothing here. They could not bring back a hug, a bedtime story, or the trust she had squandered. They could not rebuild a mother's presence that had been absent for half a decade. Nothing could. Her eyes burned. Tears threatened to spill, but she forced herself to blink them away, afraid that if she let them fall, she might crumble entirely. Regret coursed through her like fire. Every decision she had made to prioritize ambition over family now lay bare, and she could see it reflected in the quiet distance between her ex-husband and the girls. There was restraint in him, a careful, deliberate posture that spoke volumes. He was polite, almost distant, as if he feared her reaction or feared what this moment might awaken in the girls. She didn't blame him. She would have done the same. She had abandoned them once. Why should she expect forgiveness now? Her mind raced, but her body remained still, rooted in the unforgiving clarity of this reunion. Time seemed to stretch, each second folding into the next, stretching into eternity. She studied them, memorizing every detail. The curve of one daughter's cheek, the mischievous tilt of the other's smile, the way their tiny hands gripped as with trust that had survived years of absence. And she wondered, silently, painfully, how she could have let this happen. How she could have let ambition, ego, pride, and the relentless pursuit of wealth eclipse her humanity, her love, her duty. And then he looked up. She didn't know if he saw her at first. His eyes scanned the crowd, moving past passengers, over luggage, until they paused. Recognition flickered, quick as lightning, and then there it was. The guarded, cautious smile of a man who had learned to protect himself, to shield his heart from pain and disappointment. He didn't rush to her, didn't run across the terminal waving. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no cinematic embrace. There was only the quiet, heavy weight of time that had passed and the invisible distance she had created with her choices. The girls noticed her first. Their laughter faltered. Confusion rippled across their faces, tentative and curious. "Mom," one whispered, almost afraid to speak it aloud, as if saying her name might break the fragile balance they had known for 6 years. The word hit her with such force that she staggered inwardly, as though the sound carried every lost day, every missed smile, every absence she could never undo. Her throat tightened, words lodged in her mouth, but none emerged. She wanted to say everything at once, to apologize, to explain, to demand forgiveness, but the language of wealth and power she perfected in her world offered no bridge here. There were no contracts, no deals, no victories that could mend what had been broken. Only the raw, exposed human heart, trembling, vulnerable, and exposed. The terminal noises returned, sharp and intrusive, rolling luggage footsteps, intercom announcements. But now they felt cruel, reminders of the world that had continued moving while she had stood still in her own ambition. She noticed strangers passing by, oblivious to quiet drama unfolding between her ex-husband, and her daughters. They carried on with their lives, pulling bags, dragging children, their chatter a constant background that emphasized the isolation she felt. The universe, it seemed, demanded she face this alone. Her mind flashed through memories. The last birthday she had missed, the school recital where she had sent a bouquet instead of her presents, the countless nights she had chosen boardrooms over bedtime. Every misstep played in her head in slow motion, each one amplified by the laughter of the daughters she longed to touch. She realized she had built an empire of gold and glass, but the most precious treasures, love, presence, connection, had slipped through her fingers like water. All her wealth, all her success, felt hollow in this moment. She had traded human warmth for status, and now, standing in the middle of the airport, she understood the emptiness of that choice. Her heartbeat slowed, but the tension remained, a taut string ready to snap. She wanted to speak, to move, but the enormity of the moment kept her frozen. The stage was set. The reckoning was inevitable. This was more than a reunion. It was a mirror reflecting every choice she had made, every life she had neglected. She could run. She could hide. She could let another 6 years pass in regret. But the truth pressed against her like the cold airport floor under her designer heels. She could not escape herself. The girls spun around, chasing each other again, their laughter resuming, as if testing the boundaries of her presence. She watched, caught between fear and longing, hope and despair. She understood that the next step would define her, that this frozen heartbeat was both punishment and opportunity. She could step forward, humble herself, and attempt to bridge the chasm of years, or she could remain rooted, paralyzed by guilt, letting time continue its relentless march without her. In that heartbeat, she realized the true cost of her ambition and the fragile, irreplaceable nature of life's most precious moments. And then, as if the universe were holding its breath, she made her first small move, an almost imperceptible step forward. It was shaky, hesitant, yet it carried all the weight of a mother returning after years lost. This simple act, this choice to confront her absence, was the beginning of a journey neither she nor her family could have anticipated. The airport, once a place of transit, had become a crucible of reflection, humility, and reckoning. The stage was set for confrontation. The frozen reunion had begun. She swallowed hard, her lips trembling as she took the first tentative step forward. Each movement felt like crossing a tightrope, suspended over a canyon of years lost. He looked up slowly, like someone who had been guarding his heart for too long, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on her. Recognition sparked there, brief and cautious, like lightning behind storm clouds, and then his guarded smile appeared. It wasn't warm, it wasn't inviting, it was measured, careful, a shield forged over 6 years of absence, disappointment, and survival. The girls froze mid-step, their laughter fading into curious, hesitant whispers. One of them tilted her head, eyes wide, trying to place a familiar yet distant face that had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The other reached instinctively for her sister's hand, as if sensing an invisible tension too heavy for children to name. "Mom!" The word broke from her daughter's lips softly, almost a question, almost a prayer. It hit her like a fist to the chest. Her throat tightened, her chest constricting as if the air itself had grown thick and unforgiving. She wanted to say something, anything, to explain, to apologize, to fill in the blank years, but the words refused to form. They tangled in her tongue, choked off by guilt and fear. Her carefully constructed life of wealth and control, the empire she had built, the accolades, the respect she commanded, none of it mattered here. It held no power over the small human hearts before her. Here, the currency was presence, and she had none to offer. His voice cut through the silence, low, steady, weighted with every year of absence. "It's been 6 years," he said. Each word landed deliberately, slow and heavy, as if to let the truth sink deep. "You miss so much." There was no accusation, no anger in his tone, only the quiet sting of what could have been. Every syllable was a needle piercing her carefully armored soul, reminding her that no sum of money, no trophy, no worldly triumph could repair the fractures of a family left unattended. Each lost birthday, each forgotten recital, each bedtime story never told rose in her mind like ghosts, haunting the space between them. The girls shifted uneasily, glancing back and forth, trying to understand the invisible barrier that seemed to have settled like fog around their mother. They sensed it, an adult tension that was heavier than words, thicker than anything they had encountered. She noticed the way they clutched their father's hands, the subtle hesitance in their movements, the small protective gestures children make without knowing why. It was as if they were saying silently, "We belong here, with him. We do not yet know you." The realization struck her like cold water. She had become a stranger in her own children's lives. Around them, the airport hummed on. Travelers hurried past, oblivious of the storm of emotions contained in that tiny circle of space. Rolling suitcases clattered, announcements boomed over the speakers, and the scent of coffee drifted from a nearby cafe. But it all felt muted, background noise to the electric tension of reunion. Every passerby seemed unaware of the invisible lines of separation, the years carved between them, the silent accusations etched in glances. She felt small, stripped of all pretense. Here, in the raw light of reality, she could no longer hide behind designer clothes, a perfect hairstyle, or the wealth that had defined her for so long. He studied her with an intensity that made her shrink inwardly. There was disappointment in his eyes, yes, but also resilience, a quiet dignity that reminded her painfully of what she had lost and what she could never buy back. This was not a business negotiation. There was no contract to sign, no boardroom to dominate. This was real life. And in real life, there were no substitutes for presence, no power and money that could make up for the intangible, irreplaceable bonds she had neglected. The weight of it all pressed against her chest, heavy and relentless, making each breath a conscious effort. A sudden wave of shame washed over her. She had imagined this moment for years, rehearsed her approach in her mind, pictured herself stepping forward with grace and control. But reality was sharper, crueler, more exacting. Her carefully constructed confidence faltered under the heat of raw emotion. She noticed the subtle cues, the protective stance of her ex-husband, the way he stood slightly ahead of the girls, the watchful glance over his shoulder, as if guarding not just them, but his own heart from the unpredictability of hers. She felt the years between them stretch wide, a canyon carved by choices, ambition, and absence. One of the girls tilted her head, her voice a soft murmur. "Are you really, Mom?" There was innocence in the question, a fragile hope wrapped in uncertainty. She nodded slightly, but the gesture felt hollow even to her own eyes. How could she convey 6 years of absence, 6 years of mislove, 6 years of mistakes, in a single nod? She realized that apologies alone would not suffice. Presence, actions, time, patience. These were the currencies she had forfeited, and she would have to earn them back. The father's eyes softened, but only a fraction, like the thin glimmer of dawn struggling through a storm. He measured her, weighing her intentions, wondering if she had truly returned for the right reasons. Anger simmered just beneath his surface, restrained but alive, a quiet testament to the hurt he had carried. She felt the sting of every unspoken word, every resentment, every disappointment he had held. The tension coiled between them, tight and unyielding, a silent warning that reconciliation would not come easy. She took another step forward, slower this time, deliberate. She let her gaze fall gently on the girls, offering what little reassurance she could without words. Their eyes met hers, wide, questioning, filled with curiosity and caution. The moment was fragile, like a fragile glass sculpture teetering on the edge of a table. One wrong word, one wrong move could shatter it. And yet, in their cautious curiosity, she found a flicker of hope, a reminder that connection, even after years of absence, was possible if approached with humility and care. Her hands, which had spent years grasping contract and ledgers, hung useless at her sides. She wanted to reach for them, to gather them into her arms, but the weight of the past held her back. She realized that trust could not be rushed, that love could not be demanded or purchased. Each step, each glance, each silent gesture mattered more than any grand declaration. She understood, painfully, that she was no longer the person in control of outcomes. She was, for the first time in a long time, vulnerable, and it was terrifying. The girls moved slightly closer to her father, seeking the safety of his presence. He spoke quietly to them, words she could not hear, but she felt the authority in his tone, the invisible lines of protection and boundaries. She had no claim here, not yet. She was an outsider, a figure from the past attempting entry into a present that had already moved on. She felt the weight of every missed birthday, every absence, every moment she could never recover. And yet, in that awareness, a seed of determination planted itself. She would not give up. She would step forward, carefully, patiently, and earn back what she had lost. Around them, the world carried on. Travelers brushed past, carts rattled, announcements droned. Yet within the small circle, time seemed elastic, stretching and twisting around the unspoken emotions. She knew that the next moves would define everything. This was a test of humility, patience, and courage. And as she met his eyes again, she saw the faintest flicker of acknowledgement, a recognition that she had taken the first step. The unbalanced glance, the silent judgment, the restrained disappointment, all of it formed a bridge, fragile but real. And as she waited, heart pounding, breath shallow, she realized that wealth and power had no meaning here. Only honesty, vulnerability, and persistence could repair the fractured bonds before her. The air between them seemed to tremble, suspended in the weight of 6 years. When the smallest hand of bravery reached toward her, one of the girls, the older one by a hair, stepped forward, her little shoes squeaking against the polished terminal floor. Her wide eyes held a mix of hope and hesitation, curiosity and fear. "Do you want to play with us?" she asked, her voice a soft tremor that carried the fragile weight of innocence across the distance between them. She looked at her mother, searching, testing, waiting for the warmth that had been absent for too long. That single question, innocent and unassuming, cracked open a door that had been sealed by pride and regret. She knelt slowly, letting the towering weight of her adult presence shrink to their level. The world around them blurred. Travelers rushed past, luggage wheels clattering like distant drums. But she no longer noticed. The airport lights glinted off her eyes, wide with disbelief and longing, and in that moment, she saw her daughters, not the children frozen in photographs, not the memories that had haunted her dreams, but the living, breathing souls before her. Their cheeks were round, their hair catching the light, their smiles hesitant but real. Tears streamed down her face, unbidden, tracing paths she could no longer hide, carving away the years of absence in a single, shattering gesture. Her ex-husband watched from a few steps back, silent. His stance was careful, wary, a mixture of doubt and wonder flickering across his features. He did not move, did not intervene, but his eyes followed each fragile step she took, each tremor of her hands, each shuddering breath. In his silence, she read the unspoken question. Can she really return? Can she bridge a gap she created? And yet, he also sensed something he hadn't in years. A willingness, a humility, a soft courage that could not be measured in wealth or status. She extended her hand toward the younger daughter next, the girl who had been more hesitant, clinging slightly to her sister's side. Fingers brushed at first, tentative, almost fearful of contact, but then warmth began to bloom. It was a small, imperceptible shift, yet monumental. A bridge was forming, built not from grand declarations or expensive gifts, but from vulnerability, presence, and courage. The power she carried for years, the fortune, the influence, the empire she commanded, faded to irrelevance. It had no sway here, no gravity to draw the heart she had abandoned. Only honesty, humility, and love could close this distance. The girls laughed, first softly, then more freely, a sound that was a balm to her soul. It was the music she had missed for years, the melody of childhood untainted by her absence. Each giggle, each small squeal of delight, felt like a pulse of life that had been waiting for her return. She mirrored their movements, clumsy at first, unsure how to play, how to step back into a role she had long abandoned. But the laughter was infectious. It reached through her armor, through her carefully constructed persona, and stripped away every last layer of pride. She was simply their mother in that moment, nothing more, nothing less. Her ex-husband's eyes softened, a flicker of hope glinting behind the caution. The barrier he had maintained for so long began to crumble, not through argument or confrontation, but through the quiet, raw courage of a mother willing to meet her children on their terms. He had built walls to protect them, and rightfully so, yet in witnessing her humility, he sensed the beginning of a bridge, a chance, perhaps, for healing. It was not forgiveness that had been earned yet, but the first steps toward it. The daughter spun around, reaching for imaginary games, tugging gently at her hands, inviting her into their world. She stumbled, laughed, and followed, letting herself be led by them, not commanding, not directing, simply participating. She realized how heavy it had been to carry authority everywhere else, in offices, in meetings, in a life of influence, and how freeing it felt to surrender it here. In this space, power was measured not in contracts, but in patience, not in wealth, but in attention, not in status, but in love. Every small gesture, every tentative smile, every soft laugh mattered more than any triumph she had ever known. The airport lights glinted off her tear-streaked cheeks, catching the strands of hair she hadn't bothered to smooth, in the small imperfections she no longer tried to hide. It was a moment of unvarnished truth, a rare glimpse of authenticity she had forgotten existed in her own life. The girls' laughter wrapped around her, their warmth seeping into every crevice of regret and longing, dissolving years of distance. She could not erase the past, but she could meet it with courage, with humility, and with love that had been withheld too long. Her ex-husband remained a silent sentinel, watching the shift unfold. He did not intervene, did not intrude, but his heart moved imperceptibly. He realized that the walls he had built, while necessary for protection, could begin to soften if she remained consistent, patient, and present. The power dynamic had shifted in an almost imperceptible but irrevocable way. She was no longer a figure defined by status or authority. She was a mother reclaiming her place, step by step, touch by touch, smile by smile. The younger daughter, gaining courage from her sister, finally broke from her protective stance and reached out fully, wrapping her small fingers around her mother's. It was not perfect, not seamless, but it was connection. And in that fragile clasp, she felt a shift, a subtle, almost spiritual change that radiated across the trio. The laughter that followed was pure, unfiltered, and filled with relief, as if the weight of 6 lost years had been lifted, if only a little. She looked up, meeting her ex-husband's eyes, and for the first time, she felt no shame, only determination. Determination to do right, to remain humble, to reclaim her role not through authority, but through presence. She understood now that dignity was not in grand gestures, not in wealth or influence, but in authenticity. Courage was not the loud proclamation of power, but the quiet choice to kneel, to listen, to risk vulnerability in the presence of those she had hurt. The girls laughed again, chasing shadows across the floor, tugging her along. She stumbled, caught herself, and allowed herself to be pulled into their world. It was clumsy, imperfect, and beautiful. And in their laughter, she felt life, real life, pour back into her, filling the hollow spaces that ambition and pride had left behind. For the first time in years, she did not feel like a stranger in her own life. She was a mother, imperfect and human, learning again how to love, how to be present, how to give without expectation. The airport around them continued its chaos, but they were isolated in a small bubble of fragile joy and tentative reconnection. Every glance, every touch, every small laugh formed invisible stitches across the gaps of absence. She understood that healing would take time, patience, and humility, but the first, monumental step had been taken. The power that had once defined her now meant nothing. What mattered was courage, connection, and the willingness to be human. In that fragile, imperfect, laughter-filled moment, she understood the lesson life had waited so long to teach her. Dignity and love were not built through wealth or status, but through the courage to show up, to kneel, to reach out, and to meet those we love on their level. The barrier that had felt insurmountable was cracking, and with each small gesture, each tiny laugh, each hand held, a new path forward emerged. She was no longer the woman frozen by ambition and pride. She was present. She was here. And in being here, she began to reclaim everything that mattered most. The airport felt different now. It was still vast, still humming with travelers, still filled with the low roar of suitcases and distant announcements. But for her, it had transformed. The frozen tension that had gripped her chest since the moment she first saw them had begun to thaw. The small hands of her daughters held hers, warm and tentative, a tether to a life she had once abandoned. Their grip was forgiving, not blind, not naive, but curious and cautious, ready to explore a new reality. She noticed the slight smiles on their faces, flickers of light that had taken 6 long years to reappear. Her chest, so heavy with regret moments ago, now felt lighter, as the act of showing up had begun to peel away the layers of absence and pride she had carried. She walked beside them slowly, matching their pace, careful not to rush what had been broken, careful to honor the fragile new connection forming with each step. The weight of her designer heels and tailored coat felt subtly inconsequential. The trappings of wealth, the world she had built for herself, luxury cars, sprawling homes, glittering parties, they all faded into irrelevance. None of it had ever held the power she thought it did. Here, in the rhythm of small steps beside her daughters, she understood that true power lay in love, in presence, in humility. Every missed birthday, every recital she had skipped, every bedtime story lost was still gone, impossible to reclaim. Yet this moment was hers to nurture, her chance to begin mending what had been broken. Her ex-husband walked a few paces ahead, silent but alert, a careful guardian of their lives. She stole glances at him, noting the subtle shift in his posture, the way his eyes softened. Not because she had returned wealthy, not because she could offer luxuries, but because he recognized something far more valuable: courage, humility, and an honest desire to reconnect. There was no grand gesture needed, no proclamation of devotion or apology. Her actions, small and steady, had spoken louder than any words could. He had watched her kneel, watched her extend her hand, watched her enter the space of her daughters' lives with humility and patience, and in that he found respect. The twins occasionally glanced up at her, their eyes wide with curiosity and the cautious joy of discovery. They still held their father's hands, but their fingers brushed against hers, testing the waters, learning the contours of this new connection. She responded with gentle squeezes, soft smiles, and quiet laughter, careful not to overwhelm, careful to show her presence without force. Each gesture carried the weight of years lost, but also the lightness of the possibility of healing. She could not undo the past, but she could choose how to step into the present. And she chose to walk slowly, deliberately, lovingly. The terminal, once a symbol of hesitation and frozen fear, had become a place of redemption. The echo of rolling suitcases and distant chatter became a backdrop to an intimate journey, a reminder that the world continued around them, indifferent yet forgiving, waiting for those willing to make amends. Every step she took was a small reclaiming of her role, not as a wealthy woman, not as a powerful executive, but as a mother, a human capable of humility, capable of connection, capable of love. The simplicity of this truth struck her profoundly. No fortune, no status, no achievements could ever substitute for presence, for attention, for the quiet courage to show up when it mattered most. She looked down at the girls as they walked, laughing softly at some small joke or imaginary game. Their laughter was genuine, unfiltered, a music she had been denied for too long. And as she met their gazes, she felt a quiet sense of triumph. Not a triumph of wealth or power, but of choice. She had chosen connection over pride. She had chosen love over ego. She had chosen to be present, to step into their lives with open hands and an honest heart. That choice, small and human, had shifted everything. Her ex-husband finally spoke, quietly, almost under his breath, yet with a weight that made her pause. "Thank you," he said. No grand flourish, no recrimination, no attempt to belittle her. Just two words, simple but loaded with meaning. It was an acknowledgement not just of her return, but the courage it had taken to face what she had lost and still move forward. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat, feeling the deep resonance of that moment. Words could not capture the enormity of years missed, but gestures, presence, and sincerity could begin to repair the fractures. They approached the exit, the sunlight spilling through the terminal windows, golden and warm, illuminating the trio as they stepped into a new chapter. The girls' laughter rose, mingling with the ambient hum of travelers, a soundtrack of hope and possibility. She realized that life's greatest wealth had never been the empire she had built or the power she had wielded. It had always been here, in their hands, in their smiles, in the shared steps along this crowded terminal floor. She had taken for granted what no amount of money could replace: the simple, irreplaceable value of love and presence. As they moved forward, she reflected on a universal lesson etched into her heart. Wealth could buy comfort, influence, and admiration, but it could never buy what truly mattered. Relationships, trust, and connection were cultivated through care, humility, and time. Absence could never be fully undone, but presence, real, honest presence, could begin to heal even the deepest wounds. She had learned this lesson in the sharpest way possible, through the quiet, gentle resistance of two small girls and the restrained, watchful eyes of a man who protected them while she had been gone. Every step with her daughters was a reaffirmation of her humanity. The small gestures, the tentative smiles, the shared laughter, they were the new currency of her life. Her heart, once encased in ambition and pride, felt open, alive, and aware of the responsibilities that came with the role she had long neglected. She understood now that humility was not weakness, but strength. Courage was not loud or flashy, but deliberate, consistent, and patient. And love, the love that had been absent for 6 long years, was the most powerful force of all, capable of bridging gaps that wealth and status never could. By the time they stepped out of the terminal and into the waiting world beyond, the initial frost had fully melted into cautious warmth. The past could not be reclaimed, but the future was theirs to navigate together. She walked beside them, hands holding theirs, feeling the rhythm of life return to her soul. She had returned, not as a powerful executive, not as a woman defined by what she owned, but as a human capable of choosing connection, humility, and love above pride and ambition. In that moment, the world felt both vast and intimate, full of possibility. The lesson she carried was simple, yet profound. Life's greatest wealth is not measured in possessions, but in the hearts we touch, the trust we earn, and the relationships we nurture. Power is fleeting, status is temporary, but presence is enduring. She had learned, painfully, that absence cannot be erased, but a willingness to show up, to be real, and to love courageously could create redemption. And in the laughter and curiosity of her daughters, she glimpsed the proof that it was never too late to choose what truly matters. As they walked together, side by side, the airport behind them became a symbol of transformation, a place where hesitation had turned into courage, absence into presence, pride into humility. She carried with her a new understanding that would guide every step forward. Life's true richness is found not in the empire one builds, but in the love one gives, the attention one offers, and the courage one shows to be human. In that simple, universal truth, she found not only redemption, but the beginning of a life rebuilt, grounded in the only wealth that mattered: heart, presence, and connection.